Shellshock presents.
Ready?
Sharing with Shellshock Season 4. New Age of Heroes. And welcome to another episode of Sharing with Shellshock. I am your host, ShellshockPrime, and here I am right now with a new episode with all my guests, all four of which have been previously featured in previous episodes. So, welcome, Catelyn. Welcome back.
Hello.
And
thank you for having me.
And it's great to have you back on as well. And the same thing goes for you, Rox. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yep, and it's also good to see you back again, Soan.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing great. Hope you're doing good too.
I'm doing all right.
And Zenspath, welcome back.
It's been less than a week this time. This is probably the fastest turnaround I've had.
Yep. Yeah. Having you on 2 episodes in a row. Yep. Awesome.
I'm fine with that. I love it.
I love it too. Tonight we're going to talk a lot about the Sega Dreamcast, but first, before we do that, we like to talk about ourselves for a bit. So, Catelyn, remind us what you do.
Hi, I'm KutieKatelyn. Currently, I mostly post on Blue Sky, but eventually, whenever it's done, cough cough, I'm gonna be debuting my VTuber sometime this year. So if you want to see me play a bunch of weird mods and modern games, old games, all that stuff, that's what you can find me doing. So.
All right. Well, what about you, Rox?
Occasionally I stream on Twitch. Occasionally I post stuff. I make videos for YouTube. But usually you'll just see me posting up my artwork and stuff on Blue Sky.
Okay. Sounds good. So?
I stream on Twitch. I do compilations at the moment, and I'm currently working on Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which is ironic concerning the background right now.
Yes. And what about you, Zenspath?
I'm the host of the Zenspath Entertainment Network podcast. Myself and a group of friends will talk each week about gaming news, tech, movies, all kinds of nerd life type stuff around. You can find me over on Blue Sky or on Threads most of the time, just to discuss about everything, but just happy to be here to talk about some Dreamcast.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it, because tonight we have Dreamcast discussions going on. But so Dreamcast started back in, well, people know the date as September 9th, 1999, but it actually started in November 27th, 1998 in Japan. It had a very small launch lineup, but the Dreamcast ended up not selling as well in Japan because they were only able to ship about half as many units as they originally intended. But when 1999 hits, they had a big launch right out the gate. We had games like Sonic Adventure, Power Stone, Soul Calibur, and so much more. There were so many games that came out for the Dreamcast at launch on September 9th, 1999. It lasted until it was discontinued on March 31st, 2001, where they ended up ceasing production and moving from being a hardware studio to a software publisher, which Sega to this day is a software publisher for multiple platforms. But anyway, let's start from the beginning. We're going to start off with the first question, and Catelyn, I'm going to ask you this first. What was your first experience with the Dreamcast like to you?
It's a bit interesting that I grew up as a Genesis girl, right? But went to N64 after that and didn't even know about the Saturn. Didn't skipped it. Never heard of it. Don't touch me with that. But one day, for my cousin's birthday, it was maybe a month or two after launch. He gets this new Sega console. I was like, oh, I remember Sega. What's this new one? I'm like, I want to see the new one. I was maybe like 6 or 7 at the time, right? So, what you should have seen my face when he booted up Sonic Adventure 1. That was the most incredible leap in technology I had ever seen at the time. I was like, oh my God, he's in 3D and he's talking and there's a story and everything. Oh my God, it's incredible.
Yep.
And I got mine the next year, and also with Sonic Adventure 1. And that was probably like my early experiences with the Dreamcast, was basically like being able to be near launch and just to see, oh my God, like the thing I grew up with is like now big and shiny and new and like pushing forward in so many crazy ways that, like, you know, I played Mario 64, right? Because I had the N64, but and there was a little bit of voice acting in that, but that wasn't like crazy, right?
Yeah.
But Sonic Adventure was so next level. I was not ready for that. That was really an amazing first experience with the system. So.
All right. Sounds good. Rox, what about you?
So I predominantly grew up a Nintendo guy, but like on weekends and stuff, my dad would take the family on like road trips and stuff to the casino in Louisiana. And my first experience with the Dreamcast was actually at a casino. So that's also where I first played Sonic Adventure. It ended up becoming one of my favorite Sonic games of all time. And so now whenever I think of the Dreamcast and Sonic Adventure, I just think road trip.
Yep. What about you, Soan?
So it started as being a mall rat. So my local mall had an arcade and a GameStop, and I would always go to the GameStop just to hang out and go into the arcade just to hang out. And one day, like before, some GameStop had Dreamcast as the Japanese version, and he was like, "Oh, this is how we advertise it." It was like King of Fighters and a bunch of other stuff. Then I remember seeing Power Stone 1, and I was able to play it over and over, and that was like, dude, I need to get this. This is awesome. Like, and then I played a little bit of Sonic and all that stuff. He changed the game almost every day. I would go after school and play it, and so I pre-ordered it. There, it's like, okay, you got me, and I got a bunch of games. I don't even remember what I got, but Sonic Adventure was one of them. But later down the line, it was a broken copy, and I never replaced it. But somehow I was able to play that too. But Power Stone 1, and I think Soul Calibur came out later, so I picked that up later. And yeah, that's how I got it day one.
Yep. All right. Zenspath?
So for me, my wife likes to joke that this was the last system I ever bought as a free man, because I actually got this on launch day, $99.99, and then just over a month later, I started dating my wife. So it was literally right around the corner on that. But I remember hearing about this, like I was big into like gaming magazines and stuff like that, but I was never a Sega kid at all. Hardcore Nintendo all the way with everything.
Yeah.
And I had a cousin that I would always fight with. He got the Genesis. So of course the console war was a family civil war with us. So I was like, I don't want anything on Sega. You know, the Saturn kind of just completely passed me by. Which I'm just now getting into that. But I started seeing more about the Dreamcast and what it could do, and was like, you know, I could get into this. So one of my earlier systems I ended up pre-ordering. I got that sucker day one. And actually Soul Calibur was a launch day game. That was one of the initial ones, because my Soul Calibur and my Sonic Adventure, these are the two I got the day I got my system. And I've played that thing ever since. Absolutely loved it.
Nice. All right, so my first experience is very different because I did not get a Dreamcast, and I did not like ever purchase it. And but I will say before I get to my first experience, I do want to at least bring up a little bit of a story. So I was saving up for a Dreamcast a little bit, like it was my intention. But then by the time that we were starting to save up for it, there was one time that my mom, my younger brother, and I, we had like a day out. We just went outside, and we passed by a grocery store that had magazines, and they had video game magazines right up in the front. And one of them was, it was either PSM or official PlayStation magazine, was one of the two. And the headline says Sega on PS2. So I was like, what? But I didn't get to read that magazine. I did read a different magazine like at some point later, like a couple of weeks later. That's where I found out as well that they're not just making games for Sony; they're also making games for Nintendo and also Microsoft because of Xbox, which at the time I didn't really know what an Xbox was. But then it's like, so I guess I'm not buying a Dreamcast, and that money ended up going to GameCube instead. But in regards to Dreamcast as a whole, my first experience was, it was at a department store. It was at, I forgot which one it was. It was a local one, but they had electronics and they had video games. They had a TV set up with Dreamcast with Sonic Adventure, and that was the first game that I played, which at the time I thought it was impressive for what it was. And this was after Sonic Adventure 2 came out, but they had Sonic Adventure 1 on display because they just had Dreamcast there. I think they were starting to slowly get rid of Dreamcast because they wanted to make way for GameCube and Xbox, because PlayStation 2 was already out. Then I would go to different events like gatherings or other whatnot that had Dreamcasts, but it didn't last long because everyone moved on to either PlayStation 2 or GameCube, or in some cases Xbox. But it wasn't until like much later in my life that I would actually play Dreamcast, and I would actually play different Dreamcast games. Power Stone 2 was one of them. I played in the arcade first. I played Crazy Taxi a lot in the arcades, but I played that on there too. I played the first Capcom versus SNK, and there were a couple of other games, but so my early Dreamcast experience was kind of limited. But yeah, that's me. All right, so now let's go into the next question, and I'm going to start with you, Rox. What are your favorite Dreamcast games? And feel free to at least like name up to like 5 at the most.
So I mentioned one. Well, we all mentioned this one earlier. Sonic Adventure is one of them.
Yes.
The Dreamcast version of Daytona USA, Jet Set Radio, and and Sonic Adventure 2. That's really it, because there's a lot of I mean, I guess you could count Toy Story, but I played that on PS1 first.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you would count that, but outside of that, I don't really have like a lot. There's a lot of the Dreamcast library that's just kind of like a giant question mark to me.
Yeah.
But one I forgot to mention, Sonic Shuffle, since that's also the only Dreamcast game I currently own.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yes. All right.
Shell, when are we gonna play that on stream, Shell?
We'll have to have a discussion on that at some point soon. Soan, what about you?
All right, so 5. Okay.
At most, yeah. At most 5, yeah.
Okay, let's start with Resident Evil Code Veronica. One of my favorite Resident Evils, which needs a remake.
Agreed.
Capcom versus SNK. I know 2 is on Dreamcast, but it didn't come out here. So Capcom versus SNK 1 is really good.
It is.
Skies of Arcadia, one of the best RPGs.
Good.
I like Sonic Adventure 1 over 2 a little bit. And let's go with Jet Grind Radio.
Yes.
Yes. So
That's right. I forgot that it was called Jet Grind Radio.
Yes,
back
it
then.
was.
It was.
Oh,
Yeah.
and Power Stone. There's another one. Oh,
Power
yeah.
Stone. Yes.
Yeah.
What about you, Zenspath?
So, like, Sonic Adventure and Jet Set, I'm just going to mention those off the top of the bat because they are fantastic games. But for the main ones, I have to agree. Resident Evil Code Veronica is an absolute favorite of mine and was one of the first games because, like I said, I got this early. And when I'd gotten my first apartment, I remember setting up just this janky surround sound stereo. I was using a computer rack for, setting up my TV and stuff. And playing this in my first apartment at night by myself freaked me out.
Yep.
Marvel vs. Capcom 2, this is, to me, the best way to play this game, is on the Dreamcast, hands down.
Yes.
It is the one I will always play. I have already rounded the clock on the timer on this thing. It will never be down from the all nines.
Yes.
But I still have a place in my heart for Day 1 Soul Calibur.
Nice.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
played the
Hell
heck out
yeah.
of this. One of my larger
glad you-
adventure games, Shenmue.
Shenmue.
I know people would joke about it, but I absolutely
No,
love exploring
I
this.
agree.
Yep.
And then my surprise one that I actually ended up playing almost competitively online. I even bought a mouse and keyboard to play this. That is the Dreamcast version of Quake 3 Arena.
Yes.
Oh wow.
I put an ungodly amount of time into this, and I still remember every map.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm glad you brought up all these because I couldn't.
Yep. So, Caitlin, what about you?
So obvious bangers. SA1, SA2, blah blah blah. We've all played Peak, right?
Yes.
But we're also meeting G over there. No one was repping House of the Dead 2 here. What is this? Like, we got a
Typing of the Dead?
Boy. Yeah,
about to say,
Typing of the Dead.
I have
House of the Dead 2.
ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, there you go. Ready to Rumble Boxing Round 2.
Yes.
I played that on Dreamcast all the time. I unlocked Bill Clinton. I unlocked Shaquille O'Neal.
Yes.
I unlocked Power Stone 2, which I'm allowed to talk about it a little bit. I did get early code for Capcom Fighting Collection 2, and one of the games I've been replaying a lot is Power Stone 2. Guys, Power Stone 2 is just as incredible as it was 25 years ago. That game is awesome, dude.
Agreed.
And then-
Yes.
And if you want a deep cut, I was introduced to it thanks to the Nitro Rad video, Blue Stinger. If you've never played Blue Stinger,
Yeah.
it is
bad it's good.
peak cheesy 1998 Resident Evil with none of the scary parts in it.
Yeah.
But it's hard as shit, but it's a really
You
good
played
game.
Ill Bleed?
I have not played Ill Bleed,
Oh,
but I do.
I watched someone play Ill Bleed, and that Toy Story section freaked me out, man.
I gotta check it out. I gotta check out Hellblade at some point, and also Blue Stinger.
Yes.
All right, so, in terms of my favorite Dreamcast games, yeah, like obviously, like the Sonic Adventure games are definitely up there. But I want to bring up some other games that have not been mentioned. Like, yes, Power Stone was mentioned already, and yeah, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and Capcom vs. SNK, yep. But here are some other ones I want to mention. Sega Bass Fishing. Sega Bass Fishing deserves to be mentioned.
Yes.
I'm still trying to find the controller.
You understand, Shell. That game's not a meme. That game is pretty sick. That
Yes.
game is kind of sick.
It's without a doubt the best dedicated fishing game ever. Like, I don't think there's any other fishing game that can beat that. It's so good. Yeah, fishing mini games and other games, sure, but as a dedicated fishing game, you ain't going to have anything that's more peak than Sega Bass Fishing. They got it right the first time. Everyone pack it up. It's all over. That's all I'm gonna say.
Everyone pack it up.
Yep.
I can't wait for that to be the opening of the next Nintendo Direct, Sega Bass Fishing Deluxe.
I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take
With
it.
2 motion controls.
Yes. In terms of other games that I want to bring up from Dreamcast, another one Soul Calibur is a fantastic game. It's a prime example of a game that is better than the arcade. But I also want to give a pretty good shout out to another game that, while it's a Capcom game, it should have been in Capcom Fighting Collection 2, but it isn't. It's a fighting game where you use mechs. It's called Techromancer because it's part of a series of fighting game the first game is a beat 'em up called Armored Warriors, and the second game is a fighting game called Cyberbots. This is part of that series, and that game is balls to the wall, amazing. A really good fighting game where you use tech, where you use like a mechs. It kind of feels like an anime. Like, it actually is an anime. It has an anime opening and everything. It's so good. Another one, which is in the Capcom Fighting Collection 2, that would be Project Justice. The sequel to Rival Schools United by Fate. I love Rival Schools. So, Project Justice, when I first played it, that game is so much better, even though my heart goes out to Rival Schools, because that I remember playing that when I was about 11 years old. But Project Justice just feels so good. It feels so vibrant in comparison. That game just takes what they made with Rival Schools and takes it to a completely different level. The only negative that I have for that game, it's more of a nitpick of anything, no Sakura. But other than that, everything else about that game, fantastic. Fan-fucking-tastic. I love that game. And one more that I want to bring up for Dreamcast in terms of favorite games. This one I remember playing, and I actually remember enjoying this game. Granted, it's not the best wrestling game ever made, but it's actually a really good game for an arcade-style game. WWF Royal Rumble, which the arcade version was actually published by Sega. THQ published the console version because they used to have the license. But it was basically like a 4-player arcade-style wrestling game. I had fun with it. So those are my 5 games. Dreamcast had a pretty damn baller library. And granted, a good amount of those games are on other platforms, or in some cases, coming to other platforms, but I want to see more. So I would like to see some more Dreamcast games on other platforms. So next up, this one is a little bit more serious, but I want to ask you guys your opinion. And Soan, we'll start with you on this one. What do you think Sega could have done to keep the Dreamcast going for a lot longer? Because there's so many different ways that they could have done it. What do you think, Soan?
Wow, putting me on the spotlight here.
Yes, I am putting you on the spot like that. That's what I do.
Yes, you know what? I gotta think about this because they had trouble getting it off the ground because they just need the money to keep it afloat. They had to give up pretty much because they were losing money fast. Maybe they could have advertised it better in Japan. That was its slight downfall compared to us. Maybe they lost money because of, unfortunately, I'll say Shenmue kind of killed it. It was a great game, but it did cost them millions. So that was their slight downfall. Maybe if that game wasn't released like it was, maybe it could have saved some money and kept it going. That's all I got, really.
All right.
Shenmue was the most expensive game ever made up to that point.
It was.
$50 million, which in like, the mid to late 90s when it was made, right? That was That's pretty high.
That was
Yeah.
very high. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Zen? What do you think Sega could have done to keep the Dreamcast going for a lot longer?
I think the biggest thing would be working with the developers more for getting some of the games over, because at the time they were having to fight a lot of the rumors, not even true fact, but rumors and statements from like Sony about the PlayStation 2 that, oh, it's coming, it can do all this stuff. And the Dreamcast, even now, is being proven it could do a lot of that. We're seeing really good ports of like a couple of the Grand Theft Autos and other stuff running really well on Dreamcast. So the potential was there. I think the decision to go with their proprietary disc format, which I know they were thinking would have prevented copying of games, and did the exact opposite.
Oh,
Yep.
If they had made that push to
Yep.
DVD, which was available at the time, it would have jumped the price of the system up. But I think they would have held in the market against the PlayStation more, for having that ability of playing DVDs and having the extra storage. I think would have saved them for that.
Yeah. All right. Caitlin, what do you think? What do you think that Sega could have done to keep the Dreamcast going for longer?
I'm going to be real. I don't think there's anything they could have done, because we briefly talked about this in the pre-cast, the pre-podcast.
My term.
Right? We were talking about Dreamcast was a very forward-thinking console. What we know as game systems today stemmed a lot from the Dreamcast. DLC, online connectivity. Correct me if I'm wrong, the first console MMO, or at least popular one, right? Like with PSO, right?
PSO,
yeah. So, I don't think there's a lot they could have done to really change tides, because this was in development from 95 and released in 98. That was almost 3 years before PS2 was even on the market, right?
Yeah.
So there was nothing they really could have done. I think just the technological leap of GameCube, PS2, Xbox, that really just sort of cut them off, right? At one point, they even when Microsoft was throwing around the idea of Xbox, Sega was trying to say, hey, why not make it backwards compatible with Dreamcast games, right? Like, kind of the successor console in a way. And that was briefly considered, but Microsoft is like, no, we're kind of doing our own thing, right? But even still, a lot of Dreamcast games got sequels on Xbox. Shenmue 2 was only on Xbox in America, right?
Yep.
Jet Set Radio Future, the only good one. Toe Jam and Earl 3 got canceled on Dreamcast and got moved to Xbox, right?
Yes.
So, a lot of, Sega still continued, right? But I don't know if they could have done anything, but maybe a second control stick would have saved them. I don't know, but there's a lot the Dreamcast did, but I don't think it could have done anything to stop just how much of a leap the other platforms were, really. So.
Yeah. All right, those are very good points. What about you, Rox? What do you think Sega could have done to last longer for the Dreamcast?
I'm gonna be honest, it's gonna feel like a cop-out, but I kind of have to agree with Caitlin. The Dreamcast kind of feels like it was doomed from the start, I'm gonna be honest.
But we can all agree, though. Absolute peak, right?
Of course.
It's a banger of a console. Like, it really is. But, it's just like... Sega kind of hurt their reputation with the Saturn, and then that kind of bad stink sort of follow into the Dreamcast, but it wasn't really the console's fault.
Yeah.
It's just that on top of everything Caitlin mentioned, it's like the Dreamcast was sort of just doomed from the start.
Yeah. So this is what I think that they could have done. Well, yes, better advertising is definitely a big one, but I would also say the biggest thing that Sega should have done in a way to at least keep the Dreamcast going, to stand on its own, even against the likes of PlayStation 2, is to build up consumer trust once again, and also promise the consumers that regardless of what the competition does, we promise that we're going to bring you the best possible games that we can bring that you could only find on Dreamcast. Find ways to convince the consumers to continue to support the Dreamcast, because after years of being burned by not only the Saturn, but also with the 32X, as well as the Sega CD, the Sega Nomad, not to mention the fact that they even announced and then canceled the Sega Neptune. The fact that Sega was having too much, because they were getting successful, but they did not know how to manage that success at the time after the Genesis, which led to the Saturn not doing well. But also, the other issue that people seem to forget about, unless like you're like, well, a lot of people remember, like, unless you're like, for like those who are hardcore Sega fans, is the fact that Sega of Japan and Sega of America do not get along. Even to this day, they don't get along. Still don't get along. The middleman in this whole thing is Sega of Europe and Sega of UK, because both sides love Sega Europe and Sega UK, and they go to them rather than Japan and the United States work directly with each other. It's a very sad state of things. Even back in 1998, 99, because when the Sega Saturn released, because I've mentioned this before, Sega turned down 2 consoles. So right off the heels of Nintendo and Sony having that big falling out, which led to Sony like not wanting anything to do with Nintendo, they went to Sega in hopes to work on a console with a console collab. And the thing about that is that Sega of America was on board with this, because Sony's pitch to Sega was the fact that they wanted to make a console to beat Nintendo, and Sony would handle the hardware, Sega would handle the software, and all profits would be split. Whether if they gained or lost profits, it would be split 50-50. Sega of America's CEO at the time, Tom Kalinske, was on board, but Sega of Japan was like, no. And so that's what led to Sony going solo and go with the PlayStation. And the other one was Silicon Graphics went to Sega in hopes to work on something with a console. Sega of America was impressed with that, but Sega of Japan said no, they passed it off. So Silicon Graphics went to Nintendo, which led to the N64, because Sega of Japan was adamant on the Saturn success. Even though they told Sega that you can actually make a console of your own, which was the 32X, and then they made the Saturn anyway. Like, what's the point? So with the feud, so basically the fact that you have the feud between Japan and United States, combined with like the lack of consumer trust, was what led to the downfall. Those are the 2 things that I would have actually said that could have at least made the Dreamcast better, or at least last longer. Build up the consumer trust to promise the consumers that we're going to continue to support for the long haul, and also Sega of Japan and Sega of America needed to just settle differences and actually work together, rather than one portion of the company, in this case it was actually Sega of Japan, going out of their way to make bad decisions, and they pretty much threw Sega of America under the bus. If they would have worked together, Dreamcast could have lasted a little bit longer.
Probably even the Saturn too.
Yuji Naka, that's another problem. But
I mean, even the development of the Dreamcast itself, they were split up between it, because you had 2 different development platforms of Dural and Katana that each of them was making, going, this will be the next system, and they kept fighting back and forth.
Yeah,
that didn't help either.
Yeah, They went with the one that Japan had, which ended up being Dreamcast. But yeah,
You mean the Naomi board?
yes, yeah. They basically what they did was they made the hardware, and then it led to the Naomi board for Dreamcast. So yeah, that's basically my answer for how I think that Sega could have actually have lasted longer with the Dreamcast. So the next thing we'll talk about before we go to the community questions is how much does the Sega Dreamcast mean to you? And Zen, we're gonna start with you.
So I got the Dreamcast, like I said, in an interesting time in my life, right as I met my wife. You know, started dating at the time. I was trying to find places to live before I got my first apartment, kind of going back and forth. So the Dreamcast ended up not just becoming a game system, it was also like the only means of internet that I had. So wherever I'd go, I'd hijack someone's phone line, plug it into the Dreamcast, and, you know, I could browse the internet and look up stuff. And, you know, that's how I would look into gaming news and send emails and everything. But as a system itself, like, it was, like I said, the first Sega system I had, and sadly the last Sega system I would own new.
Yeah.
But we kind of formed like a little community here locally around it. We'd get together for fighting game tournaments, or that was my first foray into really playing online games, like I said with Quake 3 Arena and stuff. You guys mentioned Phantasy Star Online earlier. That was the very first MMO I ever played.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, so that's
Same.
I still go back and mess with that now, on different servers that people have kind of kicked in, and I wish I'd gotten a hold of one of the the high speed the Ethernet modems, because those things are ridiculous now, but you can play so much more stuff. I mean, the Dreamcast was the only system that ever got me until some of the later stuff to actually start getting a football game. Like, I actually picked up NFL 2K and 2K1 and enjoyed them, because I never liked sports games that much. So I was willing to try more of the stuff with that system, but the first little bit that I remember, it was like back in 97, before it came out, they had the arcade release for Virtua Fighter 3. And I remember finding that the one and only time I ever got to play it down at Disney. I was there for senior grad night.
Yeah.
And that's what blew me away, going like, holy crap, this thing looks amazing. And I then realized, oh, this is coming out for a home console for the Virtua Fighter 3 TB, which is, I think, part of why I pushed to actually pre-order and get that system. So Nintendo already had me kind of in their pocket with stuff earlier, but that was what convinced me to get the Dreamcast, and I was gung-ho with it. Absolutely loved it, and absolutely hated when it finally was failing. I was like, no, I want to keep it. Keep making games for it. I went so far as I imported. It was one of the first games I imported, Shenmue 2, from Europe, and a disc so I could play it, just so I could continue my save, because I didn't want to give up my Dreamcast yet.
Yeah.
So it stuck with for a long while on that one.
All right. What about you, Katelyn?
Well, I mentioned it briefly, but I was a Sega girl growing up, right? And that couldn't be more true today, right? Where, Yakuza, Persona, Sonic, like, Puyo Puyo, all the, even Valkyria Chronicles, right? Like, that team, that legacy, that a lot of that started on Dreamcast, right? Shenmue evolved into Yakuza eventually, right? Like, the Skies of Arcadia, we mentioned that briefly. That team went on to make Valkyria Chronicles, right?
That was them.
Some of the characters even cameo in Valkyria Chronicles, right? Like, not canon, but it's a cute little thing, right? But like, a lot of that, at the time I was living in California, so at the time that was peak, like, early 2000s Sega culture, right? Where it was like loud and cool and radical, right? Like, bright sunny skies kind of vibes, right? Like, that was the Dreamcast to me, right? So that kind of continued on, and I kind of feel like, like you were saying, Zen, I tried more games because of Dreamcast, right? Like
Yep.
it didn't have the biggest library. It didn't have the best library. It didn't have all the games. But what it had were fucking bangers, right? So it
Yeah.
was like it had a lot of games and a lot of variety, and they were all usually like an 8 out of 10. Sorry, Sonic Shuffle, you're a 7 out of 10, but that's okay. But you know, I think Dreamcast, you know, is one of those consoles where like it's appreciated nowadays because of, you know, like I said earlier, it was a very forward-thinking system, right? It was
Yeah.
a very quality over quantity kind of system. And I think, you know, we've kind of said a lot of different games here today, and I think that kind of speaks to the library and how awesome the Dreamcast is, right? Now, Sega, add that to NSO or I'll fucking get you, I swear to God.
Yes, exactly. All right. What about you, Rox? How much does the Dreamcast mean to you?
So for me, like I grew up a Nintendo guy, but like I was always really interested in the Dreamcast, and now that I finally have a Dreamcast, it just feels really it feels really cool to finally have this console I always wanted, but just could never find around me at any retro store.
Yeah.
And it has some of my again, it has like two of my favorite Sonic games of all time. On top of that, like Skies of Arcadia. First time I ever played that was actually the GameCube version, Skies of Arcadia Legends. But that's a remake, remaster, whatever, of the original Dreamcast version, and that went on to also become one of my favorite RPGs.
Mhm.
So that, like, and as well as Jet Set Radio, which Future, is the better game. Galen's 100% right on that.
No one can tell me I'm wrong,
But-
damn it. No one can tell me
but,
I'm wrong.
Those are like some of my favorite franchises, and on top of that, like just the fact that even though the console itself was seen as a failure, its legacy would like kind of live on in the form of like Billy Hatcher on GameCube, the Monkey Ball series,
Yep.
stuff like that. So it means a lot to me, but at the same time, I want to experience more of this console since I didn't grow up with it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Billy
That's
Hatcher is so Dreamcast coded. You're so right, though. You're so right.
Yeah.
yeah.
It was Dreamcast coded? I didn't catch that.
Billy
Oh,
Hatcher
Billy Hatcher.
for the game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Son, what about you? How much does the Dreamcast mean to you?
So I have both bad memories and good memories. I won't get into details with the bad memories. It was just because I was getting friends with Dreamcast, but we split apart, but that's a different story. So I was just entering college and I didn't know what I was doing. It's just like, what am I doing? Grabbing a couple of classes, whatever. And apparently there was a video game club starting up. And I later down the line did become the president of it. And I left the club once I graduated, and it just died. But anyway, when we often, it was around the time Dreamcast was coming out, so I would bring it to the club, and we would play a lot of multiplayers all through almost midnight. It was late in the day.
Yep.
There was Project Justice. There was Typing of the Dead. It was Marvel vs. Capcom, Marvel Capcom 2, Power Stone, a whole bunch of other ones I can't really think of right now. Great time. Unfortunately, I did later down the line lose my Dreamcast because people stole things and stuff like that, but I still have most of my games. So maybe later down the line I'll pick Dreamcast up again somewhere, hopefully. Also, I was part of the problem because I also got into piracy. I did download games for playing. However, the ones that are really good, I'm like, okay, I need to buy this because I need to support the system because I want it to succeed. Unfortunately, the rest is history. But yeah, it did mean a lot to me.
Yep. All
The
right.
Dreamcast is a very good system to go searching for the One Piece with.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Well,
It sold as many units as there are One Piece episodes.
yep. It definitely did. Yep. So in regards to Dreamcast, whenever I think about a video game console that I regret not getting when it was new, when it was relevant, the Dreamcast is definitely on top of that list because it has a lot of the games I know for a fact that I would love, and I have played it. I have played the Dreamcast on numerous occasions, but not enough that I wanted, in which that like I would have wanted it, because by then the Dreamcast was dead. But if I would have got it when it came out in 1999, if I would, or at least Christmas that year, we ended up getting a PlayStation that year because my uncle got us one. But if it wasn't for that, if we would have got a Dreamcast, I would have spent time on that one. I would have been playing a lot of Dreamcast games back then because I really wanted to play Sonic Adventure. But just the fact that the Dreamcast left a huge legacy after like the short time that it had. Over here was like 2 years, but in Japan it was like 4 years, because like it was getting new official games going into 2002, and then after that we were getting a lot of homebrew games, which are still going on to this day. Like when people talk about like some of the best games and the best versions of these games, like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, best way to play it was Dreamcast. Like because I played it on PlayStation 2, and while it's good on PlayStation 2, it's not great on PS2 because it does have missing frames, and like the voices of the characters are kind of crunchy in comparison to Dreamcast, where it's more crystal clear, and also the fact that Dreamcast, like, it just feels more native on there, whereas a PS2 it just kind of feels a little sluggish. Even with the HD version that was on the PS3 and 360 back in the day, back when Xbox Live Arcade was a thing, while it was definitely better, it's definitely better, and they did base it off the Dreamcast version, it still felt better on Dreamcast. I will say, even though, like, in Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection, the closest, like, I would say that right now we got, like, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on there. It's as close to Dreamcast as possible, but obviously you're not going to beat the Dreamcast experience from, like, the 2000s. It was an incredible experience playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on that, or, like, any fighting game that was on there. There was DOA 2, there was, like, Soul Calibur.
Oh, they're alive. I forgot about that.
Like, there was, like, a plethora of fighting games, plus a lot of weird experimental games that you would have only seen from Sega. Like I said, Sega Bass Fishing earlier. Like, who the hell would have thought that would be as good as it was? Like, that game has no business being as good as it is, but it is. It's fucking peak.
The game is so sick.
It had a controller, right?
Exactly.
Too.
It did. So,
Yeah.
Also, Dreamcast was also the home for the original Samba de Amigo. There was a Wii version, but that was nowhere near as good as the Dreamcast version. Like,
I think some people would argue even the Switch game's not even close to the
Rocket
Dreamcast.
controllers.
not even. It's the Maraca controllers or nothing.
And the beauty is, like, some of their experimental stuff, even the weird things would hit with people in such an odd way. Like, my wife's favorite game, Dreamcast, Sega Swirl. Like, holy crap.
Oh yeah.
Sega
much of
Swirl, Choo Choo Rocket is another one that people.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yes.
like that. It's a fun puzzle game. It's on GBA, but you definitely want to play it on Dreamcast. You definitely want to play, like, all those experimental games. Plus, with Code Veronica, here's the fun fact about that game. That game was originally supposed to be Resident Evil 3. But Sony was like, no, you're not calling it that. Your next Resident Evil game was going to be Resident Evil 3. Because it was supposed to be Resident Evil Nemesis. But it just became Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. And honestly, looking back, a lot of people who have played both Resident Evil 3 and Code Veronica, they say that Code Veronica is not only the better game, but it does feel more like a Resident Evil 3 than Resident Evil 3 did. which
Yeah,
It's
it
a
did.
generational leap.
it was. But ironically enough, that game got ported to PS2 like the next year. But yeah, but with Dreamcast, the legacy to me and how much it means to me is the fact that Sega just wanted to make a console where like everyone just focused more on fun and not so much on the graphics, not so much on like the amount of polygons like characters have, not so much on like on stories. I mean, story is important, but it was all about having fun because that's all that mattered. Like Sega just wanted something where people just had fun. There may be some cool games, there may be some weird games. There's something for everybody for the Dreamcast. And at the end of the day, Sega wanted to prove that they could make a console that just did its own thing, and that's what they did. It's a shame that it didn't
So
catch.
true.
It's a shame that it didn't catch on for a lot more of the masses. But the people who played it, they love it, they swear by it, and they will continue. They will continue to sing praises for the Dreamcast for years to come. So, and it means to me because it means a lot to me for the simple fact that Sega just wanted to just keep it real. That's what they did. So now
Hell yeah.
let's do the community questions. There's quite a few, but some good questions here. So this one's from Dari Gamer. Do you think a Dreamcast 2 or any Sega console could work today? No. And the reason I say no is because of given the amount of cost of development, like game development, especially with consoles, combined with the fact that like the games themselves are a lot more expensive. I think, in my personal opinion, that Sega is just doing just fine as as a video game software publisher. In my opinion, what do you think, Caitlin?
I look, okay. So, you were talking about how, the Dreamcast had something for everyone. It was like, the last big hurrah, right? That kind of vibe, right? I don't think they could do it again. I think Sega nowadays, not so much in the 360 and PS3 generation, but like definitely in modern day Sega, they're in a much better place. I appreciate them much more as a third party nowadays. I don't think they can make a console work. Like you were saying, Shell, it's expensive, and do they have the lineup for it? I think so, but I don't think they could carry an entire system on their own.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think it would work out.
Yeah. Rox?
I don't really think so either. Like the Dreamcast felt very of its time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like if you did a Dreamcast 2, it just it just wouldn't feel right. It's hard to explain, but yeah, I don't think it could work nowadays. Like I think a Dreamcast Mini would sell like hotcakes, but I don't think like a Dreamcast 2 would work.
Yeah. So?
If you would ask me maybe a year ago, possibly, because what Sony and Microsoft didn't really have a lot of games. They would go up against Nintendo again, but that's like old Sega. If they had old Sega or Dreamcast era Sega, maybe that would have worked. But I would agree with everybody else on that in the current times. So yeah.
Yeah. Sen?
So I think to put into words what you guys were trying to say earlier about Sega, the Dreamcast being of its time, it's correlation to the fact this is the last console I can think of that anyone designed to be how arcade games came home. You don't see that anymore. That was the existence of arcade.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
That's kind of the fitting of why Dreamcast also died. Arcade was going out. But, those fighting games were the best way to play them because they were the arcade coming home, Crazy Taxi, all this other stuff. So a Dreamcast now doesn't have the arcade to pull from anymore, because if you go to an arcade now, you get a few games here and there, but they're usually coming on console first, then going to arcade, or they're just overblown cell phone games, and nobody wants that on a Dreamcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of why it solidifies it as its time. I could see them doing, like you said, the mini system, maybe doing one that, you know, had the old games and maybe supported a development platform, just something smaller, like, hey, here's an easier way to make newer Dreamcast fan games. Like, that'd be great. Call that a Dreamcast 2. That'd be fine. You know, do it as a smaller market, not as a competition to other consoles.
Okay.
That way they can have their cake and eat it too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the next one is from the Nostalgia Alchemist. Will there be Dreamcast games released for the Nintendo Switch 2, NSO, or other? Yes, or at least I want it to be, because we need Dreamcast games on NSO so that we can be able to play Dreamcast games online. Like I know, like GameCube is coming out, and then we got Soul Calibur 2 on there. We can get Soul Calibur 1 here, but having Dreamcast on the NSO would be a big deal. And if they do that, I would be a happy camper and experience some of the games I love and some games for the first time on there. And the same thing if they were to remake any Sega Dreamcast games on Switch 2 or any modern platform. Yeah. So that's my answer. Caitlin?
I'd be down for it. I'm always an advocate for more Sega stuff on NSO because, you know, when Genesis came to NSO, people were like, "Oh, wow! Like, thanks Sega, another effing Genesis collection, right?" But like, there's a lot of stuff on NSO you can't get anywhere else. Like, there's Crusader of Senti.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but
I heard about it.
Like, people talk about that in the same breath as Link to the Past, if not better, which is pretty crazy for a Genesis game, right? To say that it's better than a Zelda game, that's insane. But you know, when people try out stuff on NSO, it's a new audience to experience the stuff that just didn't exist before, right? And I think a lot of people, I think Dreamcast is, you know, it's not jank like NES jank, right? Where it's like, oh, I don't want to play Castlevania 1. That sucks. Like, I get it. It's hard to play, right? The older games, right? But Dreamcast, I think, is smooth enough that I think a lot of people would appreciate it nowadays for what it actually is and not what it, you know, what it was before most people that own a Switch were born, right?
Yeah.
So I'd be down for it.
All right. Rox?
Man, I really hope so, because earlier, if you guys recall, I did mention the only Dreamcast game I own is Sonic Shuffle. Mm-hmm. That's not from the lack of me looking or anything. It's because Dreamcast is one of the hardest consoles to collect for, just because of how pricey the games are.
Yes.
So, and the fact that a lot of these games outside of like Sonic Adventure and Crazy Taxi and SA2, outside of like those, a lot of these games either like just never got re-released in any form. So having Dreamcast as part of like NSO, or at the very least having some of these games get like remakes or remasters on the Switch or Switch 2 or whatever, it would make these games a lot more accessible than they are currently.
Yes. Soan?
Well, I wouldn't mind it. I'm not going to say it will be because, you know, we can't predict the future. But, I mean, in terms of, like, games released on it, I wouldn't mind seeing, like, a Shenmue and then start off easy with, like, Crazy Taxi, possibly, and the Capcom games. Most of them fighting games are going to be, again, on it that didn't come out on collections or whatever. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing it. I mean, I would love to play it again, and I think the Nintendo Switch 2 would handle it, considering GameCube is coming out for it. So maybe they HD it or something. I don't know. Yeah.
All right. Zen?
So one of the nice things we're talking about, you know, the Dreamcast being kind of ahead of its time. It was one of the first systems that directly supported 640 by 480 with the VGA connector.
Yep.
So those games will scale beautifully. But the biggest point, stop and think about a Switch. Take that Joy-Con off, turn it sideways. You basically have a Dreamcast controller layout You just have to pick between either a D-pad or an analog stick, and how many games use both. But you have the controller just right there. You could set it down, split the controllers, and play it. And so even at the smallest, weakest version of the controller, you still have a Dreamcast.
Yep.
So any
Point
arcade
taken,
port
yeah.
would be fantastic. I can see people being able to do that online would be great. But a lot of Dreamcast games were a lot of fun just sitting down with somebody. I'd slap that thing on a table, give them a Joy-Con, and start playing any of those Dreamcast games. I mean, God, I'd love to have that version of Hydro Thunder come back or other stuff.
Oh,
How did I
Sammy,
give me Virtua Tennis.
How
That
did I-
game was.
oh god,
Virtua Tennis? Virtua Tennis and Hydro Thunder's a good one
core
too.
memories are locked.
Yeah. The Dreamcast was, I think that's their best chance they've ever had of competing with Nintendo of like, hey, we have 4 controller ports and we're going to have the party games. You can still break out a Dreamcast and do that. So it's a perfect fit for the Switch 2, Switch 1, whichever one. And you've got all the stuff there to do it. So
You could probably do an online thing too, like Phantasy Star as well. Forgot to mention that.
I mean, and we have a microphone on the Switch 2, so let's scar the children and make them play Seaman. That's just truly
Oh boy.
Let's.
Mommy,
Oh my
what is
God,
that fish doing to the other fish, and why does it have a face?
Why is Leonard Nimoy talking to me?
Sam Diamigo would use the controllers, or I mean the Joy-Cons.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff you could do with it. I mean, hell, you could make a fishing shell for bass fishing. One Joy-Con's in the grip, the other one's in the thing turning it, and you've got a pretty good interpolation of
Why
it.
not just the Labo? Use the Labo fishing rod. It's right there.
Yes.
Right? I have to check my Labo. It's probably deteriorated by this point.
Yep.
Uh-oh.
Let's see. So, next one comes from Destiny Decade. Had the PS2 not come out in 2000, do you think the Dreamcast would have lasted a bit longer or would have died the same way in 2001? Hard to say, because it would have helped a bit, but the problem is Sega was still dealing with the fact that there were some fans they had that still don't trust them because of what happened with the Saturn and what happened with those peripherals on the Genesis. So,
And get over it.
what would you say? So, Caitlin, what's your answer to that?
Get over it. It's been 30 years. Sega's good. they got good games, dude. Go play those games. Those games are great.
Yep.
What are you doing? Yeah.
All right. Rox.
Ooh. Oh, I actually don't have an answer for this one. Sorry.
It's all good.
Nah.
So,
Yeah, a little bit. I believe it was mentioned before, like when PS2 was coming out, there were rumors that it would be like the best thing ever, emotion engine and stuff like that. But I do remember an article I read a while when it was coming out where they, in Japan, when they were advertising the Dreamcast, they put it in stores, but on like the worst TV display ever. And they had PS2 with better monitors, and it was like Fantavision, I think it was, that it was being played on. And it was like, oh, look at how amazing, and then a bigger TV and stuff like that. And the Dreamcast was this little quarter, it just didn't do anything. So
they did the blast processing to Sega.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So without Sony, maybe it would last longer, but then we would have against Nintendo again, and I think Microsoft was on their way too. So yeah, they would have a 3-console. Maybe 3-console wouldn't be bad after all at that point, but well, whatever.
all right.
Yeah, that's.
Sen?
So if Sony delayed the PS2 for its launch, and the funny thing is, it was, even when it did launch, it was so hard to get a hold of one because they had part shortages and delivery issues and all that. But of course, for these alternate histories, Sega had no way of knowing that was going to happen. But if they had gotten any inkling of it, they could have done another push to try and market the Dreamcast better.
Yeah.
Because somebody in chat had even said, marketing was one of their bigger issues too. They may have advertised the systems thinking, but neither of the parts of the company were in that regard.
Roasted.
But
So
even if
true,
the
though.
PS2 delayed, I still would have been able to play, good Gran Turismo on there because the more they added this stuff to it. But yeah, I think it would have helped, but it would have, just like I said, with the arcade starting to die out, it was still inevitable.
Yep. So next one is from Lemon Square. We got 3 more questions total, including this one. Lemon Square asks, why was the Dreamcast so popular once it first released compared to other consoles? It had a lot of hype surrounding it. Like, the early marketing that it had was huge. The whole 9999, releasing it on that day. I remember seeing there was a commercial where it looked like, I'm not sure if it was like a thief or an assassin that apparently stole like what was supposed to be Dreamcast. I think she was a spy from Sony, and then they actually
I
caught her.
remember that one.
And then they actually caught her. At the end of it, you see Sonic saying, "We got her." It turns out she was a Sony spy. I didn't get it at the time, but it turns out she was a Sony spy. Because
I still don't get it.
because Sega was known for dunking on other companies in commercials, and this was no exception. But
Yeah. The Dreamcast was sort of the revitalization of like Sega is cool again, right? Like
yes,
the Saturn was like loud, but it was just kind of like noise, right? It didn't have an identity to call its own.
yeah,
But the Dreamcast like really made its own statement, right? And I think that's why it was so popular and iconic, right? Like the fact that Sony because at the time they were publishing the Final Fantasy games,
yeah.
Final Fantasy VIII released the same day as the Dreamcast because they wanted that. They saw it as competition. They're like, oh, the sequel to the biggest RPG of all time is here. Like, don't worry, PlayStation's still cool, guys. Don't worry, we're cool. And it's like, no, sorry, that blue rat is way cooler. I'm gonna play with that guy. That guy's way cooler.
Yeah. But yeah, like that was just so wild, like just back then, where like they had everything right, and then all of a sudden, the guy that was in charge of Sega of America at the time, Bernie Stoller, who he made mistakes when it comes to the Sega Saturn, but he wanted to right all those wrongs with the Dreamcast. He had everything going right. He gets fired the day before the Dreamcast launched.
Oh,
Who replaced him?
It was Peter Moore, who would go.
Oh
on,
yes, that's
oh my god.
That would
Tattoo man.
talk about a major downgrade. Like Peter Moore was not that great. Granted, he didn't stay for Sega for so long. He left to go to Xbox, then he left to EA. I don't even know what he's doing now, but like, yeah, he did go to Sega in 1999, like as Bernie Stoller's replacement. But yeah, like I just think that when it comes to how popular it was, like Sega had the hype. Sega, like they had everything right. Like they were in the right place and at the right time. And they pretty much just wanted to throw like the biggest poker hand that they could possibly throw and win. Like they pretty much had it all. Like they had like a fucking full house or a fucking like royal flush. They completely had in the bag. At least at the time they did. But it was
So
go ahead.
out of curiosity, I looked up Peter Moore. Be careful when you're Googling Peter Moore because you might want to specify businessman, because if you just look up his name, the first thing that shows up is a serial killer. So just be aware. Different guy, but it's 2 different Wikipedia pages. Be very careful what you're Googling, people.
One kills people, one kills markets. All right.
All right. Caitlin, do you have anything to add regarding why the Dreamcast was popular when it released compared to other platforms?
Oh no! I just think it was, it was the hype, it was the identity, it was, the pizzazz, the flair. I think they nailed it on all fronts, kind of vibes.
They did. They sure did.
I think there's a console for the Dreamcast that sums it up perfectly, where it's all the Dreamcast characters just partying inside the console, and it's like that's what the Dreamcast felt like compared to other consoles at the time. It felt like it was a party.
And you were all invited.
Yeah,
That's what it
Cool
was.
kids room.
Yep. But yeah, I'll take that as your answer, Rox, because that actually was 100% accurate. 100%. Soan?
The It's Thinking campaign was one of the best ideas they've ever had. Even the hype that you mentioned with what's her name, the spy and stuff.
Yeah.
That was a great start, but when they started doing like the inside console party, every commercial after that was like, yeah, this is what we're having. We're having a community. We're having a good time. That's what made people go into it. On top of that, I'm not much of a sports guy, but because apparently they tried to get EA to make like Madden and stuff, but they said no. So we'll make our own division, and it was one of the best like football games. I think it was NFA.
NFL 2K, NBA 2K.
Right? Yeah. Friends of mine were playing it. Ready to Rumble was okay, but the sports titles they grab on to it and they hype that up. So yeah, that's my answer.
Zen?
So I agree. The advertising, It's Thinking, was an immediate grab for a lot of that stuff. But also just looking at it from a technical standpoint, we're looking at this was the first 128-bit console. When you had 64 and 32-bit out there in the market, the size of this thing was unbelievably small for the time. It's still small now, looking at it. So that all-white design and everything, the controller was unique and different. None of us, sadly, have mentioned the VMUs. Like, we're talking about football being a thing. How great was it?
Yeah.
Like, I can pick a play.
Yeah.
No one else can see it. Or I'm playing Resident Evil and my heartbeat is down here as I get hurt. Or, and seeing all this
Kind of like the Wii U almost.
it was the second screen. We're talking about it being ahead of its time. This was over a decade before second screen type things would even come up for a lot of stuff. The closest we would
Tiny
get
Chow Garden, like that originated as the VMU mini game in SA1 and 2. And that was
in Japan. One of the harder to find VMUs was like you could have a little Godzilla on there from launch. That I'm still
true.
Oh yeah.
There was all these things you could do with it. The fact, and that's what I was from a technical standpoint looking at it like, oh, do you want this game saved? We can just plug our memory cards into each other out on a bus.
Oh
and
my God, I
I'll
forgot
send
about
it
that.
to you really quick. Like, the battery life sucked, but it was so far ahead of itself. So all of that made it feel like a future system. Like it was gonna be the future. And then throw in the modem and all the other stuff. We take it for granted now, but God, the Dreamcast should have done so much better.
Absolutely.
Oh, it did. Yeah.
Yeah. The next question is from Professor Icepick. What are your thoughts on the Dreamcast homebrew scene, which seemed to start as far back as the system's official demise and is even stronger today? I'm impressed with all the stuff they've done. They've managed to actually still make these games to keep the Dreamcast going. And I've seen fighting games. I've seen even ports in indie companies managed to actually bring some of their games to Dreamcast. The fact that they're actually doing that and still doing it to this day, I have to give them credit because they just maximized however they could with a Dreamcast console and still managed to make the games look really good. So that's my answer. Caitlin?
It was briefly mentioned earlier, but the fact that there's a homebrew group bringing the GTA PS2 games to Dreamcast.
Yep.
Unironically, the coolest thing imaginable. I could never see the Dreamcast running those games, but they run pretty well, and it's still a long way from being finished, but it's still so cool to see it. And nowadays, you're even seeing more fan translations and stuff like that. I really hope we get, more than anything, I hope we get Sega Gaga, which was the final RPG, final RPG they made for the system, because it was just a love letter to all of Sega. But the fan translations keep going up in smoke every time they start it. So I'm hoping we can get that one day. I would love to see that, but we'll see. But yeah, stuff like that always gets me hype. I love that stuff.
Yep. Rox?
So I'm not super familiar with the homebrew scene with the Dreamcast. It's something I definitely want to look further into, as well as just modding my Dreamcast in general to basically give it a custom color or something.
Yeah.
But it's something I'm interested in. I'm just not super familiar with it.
All right. So?
Actually, the homebrew scene started slightly before the demise. It was like the mid, because it started with piracy, obviously, and people started modding their games when they like pirated their games. I received a bunch of modded Sonic Adventure stuff, and I got a Jet Grind Radio modded one, and it was funny because what you could make was your own graffiti and stuff like that, and the stuff that I came up with, wow, it wouldn't fly at all today. There was a thing that the Dreamcast did was they had like a PC chip that Sega allowed. It was a Windows system that allowed people to actually port PC games to the Dreamcast. But unfortunately, a lot of people did not use it back then. So that's why the modding scene or the homebrewing scene decided to grab that, and it was easier for them to program the system. That's why it's such a big deal now when they got Grand Theft Auto, and there's other games for I forgot, but Grand Theft Auto is the biggest one. They made it work. So yeah, that's my answer.
All right. And what about you, Zen?
So, we're talking about the modding scene for these. Like, I have two Dreamcasts. One I keep standard that I fix. The other one that I've put an ODE or an optical drive emulator in, because that's probably the easiest way to get it and play a lot of these that they have now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're talking about like Grand Theft Auto. Those GTA 3 and Vice City are now playable and completable with enhancements. Like they're not running as good as some of them, but like they have some areas like their resolution and stuff is actually higher now. So they're really pushing what the Dreamcast could do. Now, the version of Windows that the system originally had was a version of Windows CE, but it also had an early version of DirectX included, which is what allowed
That's
for a
the
lot
one I
of
was
coding.
yeah.
And there were a lot of good Dreamcast games that used that. Like you would sometimes see that Windows login whenever it started, like Armada X and a few of those as well, or just Armada, sorry. So that kind of began a lot of it as well, for people being able to kind of port things over and just kind of hack into it. And I think also the initial DLC for a lot of games kind of gave people an in to mess around or add in stuff, like I said, for Sonic and a lot of the other titles. Samba de Amigo, I think people added music to it.
Yep.
There was all kinds of stuff they could modify and do, and it got so much more involved once optical drive emulators were in there, because you didn't have to burn the discs in order to get the content on there. So yeah, it's still alive and going, and I don't see the Dreamcast ending anytime soon. It's part of why I said if Sega made a Dreamcast 2 and they just made a little mini system that had these tools and just kind of gave us a modern version of it, that would live on as just another way for people to develop. So,
All right.
Yep.
It's a really good way to do it, honestly.
yeah.
And now for the last question. This is from Shad JV. Did you play any of the online Dreamcast games like PSO? And if so, what do you think of the online service? I have not. That's my answer. Caitlin?
I played PSO on GameCube to get a Tails Chow, and that was it.
Yep. Rox? Rox, you there? I'll get back to Rox. Well, Rox,
Sorry about that. There's noise on my end, so I had to mute my mic.
all right, Rox, yeah, go ahead. Did you play any
For
online games?
Unfortunately, no. Growing up, like I said, I played the Dreamcast. I never actually owned one. I only just recently got my first Dreamcast console last year.
Yeah.
Like no, not last year. I apologize. Like 2 years ago. So I just unfortunately never got a chance to experience any of the online games.
All right. Well, that's fair. So,
I did play Fantasy Star online a lot. It was a fun time, but I also played Bomberman online for a while. That was I think that was the only way to unlock the costumes, and it was a good time. I know like Quake 3 was online for a while, but I did not play that one. That's the only games I can remember, to be honest. Yeah.
all right. Zen?
Oh, I played it a lot. I was there the day they started SegaNet. I had signed up for that. Even when it switched over to AT&T running it, all the way to like the very end of the life of it, I tried keeping that going. But like I said, Fantasy Star Online was the first MMO I ever played online. Quake 3 Arena, I put an ungodly amount of time on it. Like there was parts of Shenmue you could go on and download things, messing with the DLC. Just pretty much any of the games I can get my hands on. Like NFL 2K1, when that and NBA 2K1 came out, I got those just so I could play the online and kind of mess with stuff. They had online versions of some of the racing games, even down to like Sega Swirl. I would play it in the mode where you would make a move and then it would email somebody. They'd make a move and it would email back. And you have to keep opening your email to check it. So every conceivable way you could play a Dreamcast online, I was all in. Like that was my first taste of it, and I was just wanting more. So yeah, that's why I think I have.
Did you ever get the broadband adapter they advertised?
I wish. I tried.
Oh yeah.
I never could get a hold of it. I'm actually working on a project right now where you can connect a Raspberry Pi to it, which will let you have Ethernet connection, but it kind of treats it as a phone line, so it's faster but not as fast. But I'm having to put engineering into this to make it work. So
well, good stuff right there. All right, well, that's gonna do it for this podcast. So that's Sega Dreamcast, Sega's last console. Sega did give us a lasting legacy with the Dreamcast, and even though they may be a software company right now, people still talk about the Dreamcast to this day. People still love the Dreamcast and talk about the games, the experiences. So, like, Sega, thank you once again for the Dreamcast. And to Caitlin, Rox, Soan, Zenspath, thank you all for being a part of this. I really appreciate it. Like you guys coming in.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yep.
it's always fun.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
How
Caitlin.
could anyone do this?
Yes. But yeah.
I see.
Anyway, so before we go, Caitlin, where can we find you?
You can find me on Blue Sky and on Twitch. KutieKatelyn everywhere. Doesn't matter. I'm pretty lucky that I got consistent with that. Hell yeah. But you can find me. If you love Sega stuff, you should probably follow me. I like Sega stuff. That's all I'm saying. Also, Shell, terrible timing. Episode 64 is the Dreamcast episode. Come on now. Come on.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, because I did do N64.
But thank you for having me, though. I appreciate it regardless.
No problem. Rox, where can we find you?
Twitch at RoxTheCat. Whenever I stream on the extremely rare occasion. You can also find me on YouTube at Rox's Gamepad, and you can find me on Blue Sky, which is where I'm at most of the time whenever I post art.
Yep. All right. So where can we find you?
I stream on Twitch. It's S0AN. And I'm on Blue Sky, just Soan, SOAN.
All right. And Zen?
Most places online, if you look for Zenspath, you could generally find me, or you can go over to zenspath.com. Every Sunday morning, our latest episodes of the Zenspath Entertainment Network podcast comes out. So we're actually recording a new episode tomorrow, so
Awesome.
find us here soon.
Yep. And of course, you can find me pretty much in a couple of places, but I'm mainly on Blue Sky and Discord, as well as Twitch. And I also upload a lot of my VODs to YouTube, which thankfully Twitch, as of this recording, gave a lot of people a 1-month extension to import their VODs from Twitch to YouTube, like if they have highlights and all that stuff. So if you see all these uploads right now, that's why. But yeah, in terms of social, Blue Sky and Discord, I don't use Twitter anymore, but yeah. Anyway, the next episode that I'm going to be doing will be happening next Sunday, and it's going to be PlayStation 2. So I have Mr. Ben, I have Epic Man, Mr. Redbeard, and Tian Angelic all ready to talk about PlayStation 2. So that's the next episode on April 27th.
Nice.
Yeah, April 27th. Yeah, that's a Sunday. Yep. All right.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Nice.
So, with that in mind, thank you all so much for tuning in. And one more time, Katelyn, Rox, Soan, Zenspath, thank you all so much for being a part of this episode tonight.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, always a pleasure, dude.
Yep.
I've had so many flashbacks tonight.
Yep. Well, as always, may you take care of yourselves. Be awesome. Stay awesome. Tell your loved ones you love them. Check out with them as always. Fight for everlasting peace. I'll see you guys next time, and y'all have a good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks for watching Sharing with Shellshock Season 4. Your name will be inscribed in the pages of podcast history.